Hi everyone, my name is Nicolo Nasol. I'm a freelance writer, editor, and occasional drinker, which is why I've chosen this particular topic. I'm also an avid reader of fiction, and I've observed that there's a good number of drinking stories worldwide, likely because there are many alcoholic writers and great ones at that, and they happen to be my favorite ones too. And if you look up a list of alcoholic writers online, you'll find that they're mostly Americans, mostly males, and more than a couple of them meet tragic ends. And their stories are mostly about solitary drinking. And besides, you're probably familiar with the cliches like a man drinking alone at a cafe or at a bar in a bar, and the man was spilling his life story to the bartender, or going home with a six-pack in hand and getting drunk alone in his room. And these stories are quite different from ours in the Philippines. Our drinking scenes are ordinarily set in noisy KTV bars and dance bars filled with dancers on stage, half naked or fully naked. And there are also drinking in street corners and outside sari-sari stores. But these are now disappearing because people now drink in 7-Elevens, outside 7-Elevens, I mean. So let me talk about a few examples of Filipino stories that have drinking in them. The Lisay story is set in a dirty bar in Cubao. It's like an inverse of Hemingway's A Clean, Well-Lighted Place. In this bar, overworked manual laborers head to after work to dance with the young hostesses and cop a feel of breast and bum, and then later eat delicacies like dogs do. Next, in the Riada's Dog Eaters, wherein a group of men gathers in a sari-sari store early in the morning instead of the usual evening to drink tuba, a native drink made from fermented palm sap. The men leave their wives at home to run the household and care for their children. They are now also preparing to kill another dog to go with their alcohol. At home, one pregnant wife, having had enough of his husband's neglect and abuse, decides to take revenge, and she does it by killing the husband's beloved dog and aborting her baby. In Noliado's Rice Wine, and this story is set during famine, and the story centers between an aging widower who was a former revolutionary who finds out from his drinking companion that her daughter is working as a prostitute. That daughter was selling her body to put food on the table. And perhaps the most famous drinking story in the Philippines. Um, we Filipinos are mild drinkers. This is a humorous story about an American soldier drinking with a Filipino farmer. And this American soldier who brag about drinking, having have drank all the liquors in the world, was getting knocked out by lambanog, a strong native Filipino drink. Now, onto the art of drinking. And I mean, all those stories depict the ways Filipino drink. And so here we're looking at the evolution of Tagay. Now, Filipinos drink in many ways, as observed from those stories mentioned. But what sticks out is not what we drink, but rather how we drank it. So earliest accounts about this Tagay culture can be traced back to Pigafetta. In the pre-Hispanic society, eating and drinking are treated as a single activity. Visayans were observed to be heavy drinkers, but held their drinks exceptionally well. And because we have lost this custom of having wine during meals, according to Nicoquin, who may be our most famous alcoholic, we have lost the legendary ability to hold liquor and no longer possess our ancestors' head for wine. Back then, Visayans never drink alone. Only alcoholics do, according to Mojares. Besides drinking from a solitary cup passed to everyone by the master of ceremony, what we now call as gunner, Visayans also drank wine through reed straws from a common jar, like babies sucking milk from a mother's breast. So throughout the course of our colonial history, the culture of Tagay has turned less and less communal and more rigid, something closer to the American way. And the same thing can be seen in our contemporary literary fiction. In drinking, we find more despair and more solitude, no doubt caused by the changing times. And the only fun drinking story, as far as we can remember, is we Filipinos are mild drinkers. So here we come to the final subject of my paper. This is about Carlos Cortés. And in his stories, he subtly incorporates Tagay. I also find certain qualities of humor in the vein of Roses, as I've mentioned, and less of the doom and gloom permeating in his stories. He's an award-winning writer, one of the region's best, I say, and undeservedly criminally underread. And in his stories, there are thoroughly unique Filipino metaphors related to Tagay. So in the stories I'll be discussing, there's a recurring symbol or theme in his drinking not present in other stories already mentioned. The characters here not only commune with each other, but also commune with nature. So let me begin with the first story, Close to the Bone. This story is set in southern Cebu, behind the hills of Argao. And for background, those places are known for tuba production. And there's one place in Dalaget, literally named Barangay Tuba. In the story, Chingoy's father made him choose between going to the rehab center or a vacation in the badlands. Chingoy chooses the rustic spell. He's going to be living with the farmer and his son, the Saop, which is caretakers of their land for the meantime. He has been there before when he was 9, and he's a playmate with the farmer's son. He finally returning as an adult. He looks at the farm with the eye of an outsider. He sees the parched earth slowly cracking in the summer heat. A marginal existence, he thought, and life here is lived close to the bone. On the first day there, Botyok, the son of the farmer, returns home, bringing a bayong or buyot, which contains bottles of beer. And also on this other part of his shoulder, he also brought palm wine or tuba. So he empties the bag in front of Chingoy, and the bottle clinkled, which is to signify that since he's a city boy, uh, not all city boys know how to drink tuba, and Chingoy didn't quite like it. I mean, the implicit consideration. Now, drinking his beer, Chingoy appreciates that the sky here in the Badlands are clearer, the stars brighter, despite the dryness of day. And so Manong Panyong, the father, joins them for a drink. Butchok, his son, offers a bottle of beer, to which his father refuses, saying that he's not used to cerveza or beer. But then he accepts the glass of tuba and downs it in one go. Okay, they're drinking, but their talk is tilted, and that's owing to the distance between them, in the difference of accents. The southern way of talking is quite um, drawling and with no contractions, as opposed to the city slick, which is snappy and sharp. And this is a function of the distance. And Shingoy, hearing this talk, feels far from home, and that gives him a sense of freedom. Now he finishes beer, and so the farmer passes him the glass of tuba, which he helped drank until the jug was empty, and Shingoy passes out. On the following days, Shingoy spends his time lolling during daytime, reading books, listening to music, climbing the mango trees, and bathing in the creek. When the heat becomes tolerable in the afternoons, Shingoy goes for a long walk and goes home back at dusk, um, drinking again as they did the previous evening. So he's enjoying the rustic spell while curiously studying the land. And to the extent of heading to the town library, wherein he's reading a book about the history of southern Cebu. So summer wears on, and one night of drinking, where he secretly smokes weed, he gets an epiphany. This is also based on the things that he'd read from a book, as to why the mountains of the south has gone bald, how the times have been lean for ages, and how the farmers get poorer and poorer harvests in each generation, and how life there is always close to the bone. And these problems all date back to the Spanish colonization, when the Spaniards changed the native crops, replacing them with fields of maize or corn, and this dried up the land, turning it bad. This next story, Who Loves to Lie with Me, it has the same communion with nature. The story centers around a small group of young boys spending their summer carousing in a mango grove. although it looks like to be set in the city rather than in the mountains. And they call themselves the Mango Boys. And the story opens in a really interesting way, which highlights the importance of nature, as you can read there. The narrator then adds that the tree house, seemed to have grown there by itself, a natural part of the tree. And the bamboo benches were stuck on posts on the ground so that they can't be moved, giving a measure of stability. And their drinking begins this way. First, there would be two guys sitting on a bench taking shade. Then another guy drifts in, bringing the number of them to three. Then a chain reaction would happen. The narrator says that drinks would appear in a pitcher and a glass. This soon attracts more guys. Then, before they knew it, a guitar materializes, prompting them to go up the treehouse. As the drinking goes, there's no more divide between singers and drinkers since they all sing, rather off key, and some of them blaming the guitar. As the seasons go, rain and sun, their friendship grows as well, and so does their attachment to the tree. And this story, unlike the previous one, is quite poignant. This is structured in a way that the narrator is looking back on his youth. In its last pages, it takes a poignant turn when the narrator says that he could no longer join the Mango Boys drinking sessions. He says that life happens. Has the exam, wife, work, and time passes. And before he knew it, he and his wife migrated to another place far from the mango tree. And only during his occasional visits to his parents' house does he can see the mango tree grow old. And this farther drives home the truth that the Mango Boys had grown up and led different lives and unlikely to gather in the treehouse anymore. And before the story closes, the narrator heads for a distant city for an appointment. He rides on a bus, and along the way, he notices a grove of mango trees not far from the road. As the bus gets nearer and nearer, the narrator sees a bench under the mango, and the wind blows the leaves aside, exposes a treehouse. So the narrator right here sees the same scene which he had experienced when he was younger. There are guys drinking, singing along with the guitar, and now he's thinking that the years had telescoped things, and I was watching the scene through a time machine. The Mango Boys were all there. We had simply moved, says the narrator, and he wishes to join them for a last drink. But instead, he rides the bus because he has some work to do. So in He Who Loves Me, in these two stories, the depiction of Tagay is through symbolic action. The depiction of Tagay becomes rich with meaning. We read on Close to the Bone how tuba was replaced by the beer in the same way that maize replaced the native abaca in Argao, which ended up drying its land. Where once tuba or any native drink was central to our Filipino table, its place now is replaced by imported soft drinks and beer, which dries up all culture close to its bones. In Who Loves to Lie with Me, Taga is still practiced as a central activity for bonding, and its roots as people to the ground, much like how the characters there are bonded to the tree. And but then later outgrowing it for a multitude of reasons, say life happens, and after all, the story was about a man looking back to his past. And that's a metaphor of us maybe right now, what I'm doing is looking back to my past, a past way before my time. And then, as a side note, before ending this talk, the Mexicans learned from the Filipino immigrants how to make tequila. And the Mexicans made tequila their national drink, which was inspired from our tuba. And tuba is even sold in Mexico. Many countries have their national drink, so why don't we have ours? So do we let San Miguel beer or Red Horse be our national identity? And to end this talk, again, symbolically, I'll say that we cannot live on bread alone. We must drink in order to, we must drink, and in order to drink right, we must not forget how we as Filipinos drink. And yeah, thank you, and email me if you'd like a drink of tuba, a cup of tuba. Salamat.